The photograph arrived on a Tuesday morning in October 1946, delivered by a postman who wouldn't meet Klaus Richter's eyes. It came in a brown envelope with no return address, just his name written in handwriting he didn't recognize. Klaus stood in the doorway of his small apartment in the Kreuzberg district of Berlin, the autumn wind pushing dried leaves across the cracked pavement behind him. He turned the envelope over twice before opening it. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Inside was a single black and white photograph. His younger sister, Greta, stood beside an American soldier outside what looked like a dance hall. Her hand rested on his arm. She was smiling. Not the careful, rationed smile Klaus had grown accustomed to seeing on German faces since the war ended, but a genuine expression of happiness that made her look younger than her 23 years. The soldier was tall, his uniform pressed, his face turned toward her with obvious affection. Klaus felt his chest tighten. He hadn't seen Greta in 4 months. Not since their argument in July when she told him she was seeing an American from the occupation forces. He'd said things he regretted now, things about loyalty, about shame, about betraying their dead brother Martin who'd fallen at Stalingrad. She'd left his apartment in tears, and he hadn't gone after her. Now this photograph felt like an accusation. The apartment was cold. Everything in Berlin was cold now. Klaus moved to the small kitchen table where his breakfast, a thin slice of bread and ersatz coffee, sat untouched. He propped the photograph against the sugar bowl and stared at it while his coffee grew colder. Through the thin walls, he could hear Frau Bergmann next door moving around, the shuffle of her slippers a familiar morning rhythm. She was alone too. Her husband hadn't come back from the Eastern Front. Klaus was 31 years old, though he felt decades older. He'd spent 3 years as a reluctant Wehrmacht soldier, had been wounded at Normandy, and had spent the final months of the war in a British POW camp. When he'd returned to Berlin in January 1946, the city he'd known was gone, replaced by mountains of rubble, desperate people, and the four-power occupation that had carved the city into zones controlled by Americans, British, French, and Soviets. He worked now as a translator at a small medical clinic in the American sector. His English learned from his mother who'd been a teacher before the Nazis came to power. It was honest work, necessary work, helping German patients communicate with American doctors who'd come to help with the public health crisis. But every day he felt the weight of contradiction. Grateful for the employment, resentful of the need, ashamed of his gratitude. The photograph stayed on his table all morning. When he finally left for work, he slipped it into his coat pocket. The clinic was busy. It was always busy. Dr. Morrison, a tired-looking American physician from Ohio, saw patients in a steady stream: children with tuberculosis, elderly people suffering from malnutrition, women with complications from the brutal winter and the brutality that had followed the war's end. Klaus sat at a small desk in the examination room, translating symptoms and diagnoses, medical histories and treatment plans. "Tell her the penicillin should clear the infection within a week," Dr. Morrison said, preparing a syringe for an elderly woman with pneumonia. Klaus translated, and the woman nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Tell the doctor thank you. Tell him my grandson is alive because of his medicine." These moments of gratitude were common, and they always left Klaus feeling unmoored. The Americans had bombed German cities, killed German soldiers, and now they were saving German lives with their medicine and their food supplies. What was he supposed to feel? During his lunch break, Klaus walked to the corner where black market traders gathered. It was technically illegal, but everyone knew it happened, and the occupation authorities mostly looked the other way. A young man named Werner, who'd lost his right arm at Kursk, sold cigarettes and chocolate that he obtained from American soldiers. Klaus had known Werner's family before the war. They'd lived 3 buildings down from his parents' apartment, the one that no longer existed, reduced to rubble during the Soviet assault on Berlin. "Klaus," Werner called out, waving with his remaining arm. "I haven't seen you in weeks. You need anything? I've got Lucky Strikes, genuine American chocolate, even coffee, the real stuff, not the acorn water we pretend is coffee." "I'm looking for information," Klaus said, keeping his voice low, "about German women who are involved with American soldiers." Werner's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. That's half the women in the American sector, Klaus. You'll have to be more specific. My sister, Greta Richter. She's been seeing an American. I need to find her. Werner lit a cigarette, considering. Why? You planning to make trouble? I just need to talk to her. The Americans don't take kindly to German men causing problems for their soldiers or their companions. You remember what happened to Friedrich Kohler? He confronted his wife's American boyfriend, ended up spending 3 months in detention. When he came out, his wife had left for America with the soldier. Klaus felt his jaw tighten. I'm not going to cause problems. She's my sister. I just want to talk to her. Werner exhaled smoke slowly. There's a dance at the America House on Friday nights. Lot of German women go there to meet American soldiers. If your sister is seriously involved with one, she might be there. But Klaus. He grabbed Klaus's arm with his remaining hand. Be careful. Things are complicated enough without adding family drama to the mix. These women, they have their reasons. Klaus walked back to the clinic, Werner's words echoing in his mind. These women have their reasons. He knew what the reasons were. Everyone knew. Food, safety, protection. The American soldiers had everything Germans lacked. Full rations, cigarettes worth their weight in gold, access to medical care, the ability to move freely between sectors. And beyond the practical reasons, there was something else. The Americans represented the future, while Germany represented only a shameful past and an uncertain present. But knowing the reasons didn't make it easier to accept. That evening, Klaus visited his old neighbor, Herr Vogel, who'd managed to keep his small bookshop open through the war and its aftermath. The shop was in the British sector, requiring Klaus to pass through a checkpoint, but the guards waved him through with barely a glance at his papers. Herr Vogel was 73, white-haired and bent, but his mind remained sharp. Klaus, he said, embracing the younger man. Come in, come in. I just made tea. Well, something that resembles tea. How is your work at the clinic? They sat in the back room of the shop, surrounded by books that had survived the war. Herr Vogel had hidden his unacceptable volumes during the Nazi years and had somehow preserved them through the fighting. Klaus found comfort here among the familiar spines, the smell of old paper and dust. I received a photograph today, Klaus said, pulling it from his pocket. Of Greta. Herr Vogel studied the image, his expression unreadable. She looks happy. She's with an American soldier. Yes, I can see that. Herr Vogel handed the photograph back. And this troubles you. Doesn't it trouble you? After everything that's happened. The old man was quiet for a long moment, sipping his tea. Finally, he spoke. My daughter, you remember Clara? She married a Jewish man in 1935. I helped them escape to Switzerland in 1938. I haven't seen her in 8 years. I don't know if she's alive. His voice cracked slightly. What troubles me, Klaus, is the millions of dead. What troubles me is that we allowed madmen to lead us into barbarism. What troubles me is that an entire generation of young people had their lives destroyed by war and ideology. He paused. A photograph of a young woman smiling next to a soldier? That doesn't trouble me. That gives me hope. Klaus felt something twist in his chest. But Martin died fighting these people. Martin died because of Hitler's war, not because of that American soldier in the photograph. Don't confuse the two. Herr Vogel leaned forward. Your sister is 23 years old. She's lived through Nazi rule, through war, through the siege and the occupation. If she's found someone who makes her smile like that, who are you to take it from her? Klaus couldn't sleep that night. He lay in his narrow bed, listening to the city's nighttime sounds. Distant voices, the rumble of a truck, somewhere a woman crying. The photograph sat on his nightstand, visible in the moonlight that came through his curtained window. Greta's smile seemed to mock him. He thought about their childhood, before the war, before the Nazis, when their family had been intact. Their father had owned a small printing business. Their mother had taught English at a gymnasium. They'd lived in a comfortable apartment in Charlottenburg, had taken vacations to the Baltic coast, had celebrated Christmas with relatives who were all dead now or scattered across occupied Germany and beyond. Greta had been the youngest, the brightest, the one with dreams of studying medicine. Martin, 2 years older than Klaus, had wanted to be an architect. Klaus himself had been studying engineering at the Technical University when the war started. None of them had achieved their dreams. Martin was dead. Greta was working as a secretary somewhere in the American sector. He didn't even know exactly where. And Klaus was translating medical terminology, living in a 2-room apartment that would have been considered a closet before the war. He rose before dawn and walked through the quiet streets. Berlin in the early morning had an eerie beauty. The rubble piles cast long shadows, and the few people out moved like ghosts through the destroyed landscape. Klaus found himself at what remained of the Gedächtniskirche, the memorial church in the center of the city. Its tower stood broken, a jagged reminder of what had been lost. An elderly woman was sweeping the steps, though there seemed little point. Klaus recognized her. Frau Zimmer, who'd lost all 3 of her sons in the war. "Guten Morgen, Frau Zimmer," he said softly. She looked up, squinting. "Klaus Richter. You're up early." "I couldn't sleep. None of us sleep properly anymore." She leaned on her broom. "We're all haunted, aren't we? By what might have been." Klaus sat on the cold stone steps. "How do you bear it? Losing all 3 of them?" Frau Zimmer was quiet for a long moment. "I bear it because I must. Because giving up would mean their lives meant nothing. I bear it by sweeping these steps every morning, by helping my neighbors, by trying to be kind in a world that has forgotten kindness." She studied his face. "What's troubling you, boy?" He told her about Greta and the photograph, about his anger and his confusion. Frau Zimmer listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "My youngest son, Peter, he wrote me a letter before he died. It arrived 3 months after the telegram. In it, he said he hoped that when the war ended, people would learn to be happy again. He said he hoped the next generation wouldn't inherit our hatred." She touched Klaus's shoulder. "Your sister smiling in a photograph, that's not betrayal. That's survival. That's hope. Don't take it from her." Klaus arrived at the clinic to find chaos. A pregnant woman had collapsed in the waiting room, and Dr. Morrison was shouting for Klaus to translate. The woman's name was Anna Schneider. She was 8 months pregnant, and she was severely malnourished. "Ask her when she last had a proper meal," Dr. Morrison ordered, checking her pulse. Klaus knelt beside the woman, who was conscious but weak. "Frau Schneider, the doctor needs to know." 3 days, she whispered. "I had bread 3 days ago. My ration card was stolen." Dr. Morrison's jaw tightened. "Tell her we're admitting her. She needs immediate intervention or we'll lose both her and the baby." As they moved Anna to the small ward behind the clinic, Klaus learned her story. Her husband had died in the war, her family's apartment had been destroyed, and she was living in a basement shelter with 14 other people. The father of her child was an American soldier who'd been transferred back to the United States 2 months ago. He'd promised to send for her, but she'd heard nothing. "He was kind," Anna said, tears streaming down her pale face. "George, that was his name. He shared his rations with me, protected me from the Russians who came through our sector. I know what people say about women like me, but I loved him. I still love him." Klaus held her hand while Dr. Morrison prepared in 4. "Save your strength, Frau Schneider. You think I'm a whore, don't you?" she said, her voice barely audible. "You think we're all whores." Klaus thought about Greta's smile in the photograph, about Frau Zimmer's sons, about the rubble and the hunger and the desperation that surrounded them all. "I think you're trying to survive," he said quietly. "I think we all are." Over the next 3 days, Klaus visited Anna regularly, bringing her extra food from his own rations. She told him about George, how they'd met at a distribution center where she was waiting for food, how he'd taught her English phrases, how he'd proposed marriage before being suddenly transferred home. She showed Klaus letters George had written, promising to send for her, promising to marry her properly in America, promising that their child would have a better life than anything possible in occupied Germany. "Do you believe he'll come back for you?" Klaus asked. Anna's hand moved to her swollen belly. "I have to believe it. If I don't believe it, then I'm just another German woman who got pregnant by an occupier, And my child will grow up bastard in a country that already hates us. On Friday evening, Klaus found himself standing outside the America House, the American Cultural Center where the weekly dance was being held. He could hear music coming from inside, American jazz, upbeat and foreign. Through the windows, he saw couples dancing, American soldiers in uniform, German women in their best remaining dresses. He didn't go inside. Instead, he waited across the street, partially hidden in the shadows of a damaged building. He felt ridiculous, spying on a dance hall like some jealous fool, but he couldn't make himself leave. Greta arrived just after 8 o'clock. She was with the soldier from the photograph, a tall man with sandy hair and an easy smile. He held her hand as they walked, and she laughed at something he said. Klaus watched them disappear into the building, and something in his chest seemed to crack open. Klaus started paying attention to the German women who came to the clinic with American soldiers. There were many of them, young women who accompanied their boyfriends or lovers, who translated for other patients, who waited in the corridor while their American partners received medical care. He studied their faces, trying to understand what he saw there. Some looked defiant, chin raised against the judgment they knew they faced. Others seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact with other Germans. Still others looked simply happy, holding hands with their American companions, laughing at private jokes, building small moments of normalcy in the wreckage of post-war Berlin. One afternoon, a young woman named Liesel came in with a split lip and bruising around her eye. She was accompanied by an American sergeant who looked furious. Through Klaus's translation, the story emerged. Liesel had been attacked by 3 German men who'd seen her with her American boyfriend and decided to teach her a lesson. "Did you see who attacked you?" Dr. Morrison asked as he cleaned her wounds. Liesel shook her head. It was dark. They came from behind. But Klaus could see the fear in her eyes. She knew who they were, but naming them would only bring more violence. The American sergeant, whose name was Harris, paced the examination room. "This is the 3rd attack on German women in our sector this month," he said to Klaus. "Can you explain to me why German men think it's acceptable to assault women?" Klaus translated the question for Liesel, though it was clearly directed at him. He felt the weight of the sergeant's anger, the implicit accusation. "Not all German men," he began. "No, not all," Harris interrupted. "But enough. Enough that women are afraid to walk the streets. Enough that we're having to provide escorts for women who just want to attend a dance or see a movie." He turned to Liesel, his voice softening. "I'm sorry this happened to you. We'll increase patrols in your neighborhood." After they left, Dr. Morrison said to Klaus, "It's complicated, isn't it? The occupation, the relationships, the resentment. I try to understand both sides, but sometimes—" He trailed off, washing his hands at the small sink. "Sometimes I think the war didn't end, it just changed forms." That night, Klaus went to a small bar where men from his old neighborhood gathered. It was in a basement, lit by candles, smelling of cigarette smoke and cheap schnapps. Werner was there, along with Friedrich Kohler, the man who'd been detained for confronting his wife's American lover. Klaus listened to their conversation. "They come here with their cigarettes and their chocolate and their goddamn chewing gum," Friedrich was saying, his voice bitter. "They defeated us, occupied us, and now they're taking our women too. What do they leave us? Nothing. We're left with nothing." "The women have choices," Werner said, though he sounded uncertain. "They can choose." "Choose." Friedrich slammed his glass on the table. "What choice is it when one man offers you food and safety and the other offers you poverty and shame? That's not a choice, that's coercion." Klaus found himself speaking. "My sister is seeing an American soldier." The table went quiet. Friedrich stared at him. "And what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know." "You should stop her," Friedrich said. "Before she gets pregnant. Before she becomes one of those women everyone spits on in the street. Before she destroys what's left of your family's honor." "Our family's honor died at Stalingrad with our brother," Klaus said quietly. "It died in the camps, in the bombings, in all the crimes we committed or allowed to be committed. There's no honor left to protect." Friedrich's face darkened. So you'll just let them take everything? You'll just surrender? We already surrendered, Klaus said. Unconditionally. Or have you forgotten? He left the bar feeling more confused than before. He walked for hours through the dark streets, past the ruins and the temporary shelters, past the checkpoints where occupation soldiers scrutinized papers and faces. He ended up at the apartment building where he'd lived before the war, or what remained of it. The entire eastern side was gone, collapsed into rubble. His family's apartment, 4th floor, facing the street, was simply absent, as though it had never existed. He stood there in the cold October night, trying to remember the layout of the rooms, the color of the wallpaper, the sound of his mother's voice calling them for dinner. But the memories felt distant, belonging to a different person in a different world. Klaus! He turned to find Greta standing behind him, wrapped in a coat that looked American-made, too new and too warm to be anything else. I saw you from the corner, she said softly. I've been living nearby, with James. The soldier. His name is James, she repeated firmly. James Patterson. He's from a place called Iowa. He's a sergeant in the supply corps. He's kind and funny, and he treats me like a human being, which is more than I can say for most German men these days. Klaus felt a surge of anger. I treated you like a human being. I'm your brother. You told me I was betraying Martin's memory. You told me I was a whore, same as all the others. I didn't, but he had. Not in those exact words, but close enough. I was angry. You're still angry. Greta's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with tears. I can see it in your face. You're angry that I'm surviving. You're angry that I'm not punishing myself for being alive when Martin is dead. You're angry that I found someone who makes me happy. Are you happy? Klaus asked. Truly? Or are you just safe? Greta was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm 23 years old, Klaus. I watched our city burn. I was here during the Soviet assault. Do you know what that was like? The soldiers, She stopped, breathing hard. James found me afterward. I was half dead from starvation, living in a basement with rats. He gave me food. He got me medical attention. He helped me find work. And yes, he fell in love with me and I fell in love with him. So don't you dare reduce that to just safety. Don't you dare make it less than it is. Klaus wanted to ask her about the things that had happened during the Soviet assault, wanted to understand her pain, but he couldn't find the words. Instead, he said, he'll leave. They all leave eventually. Maybe, Greta said, or maybe he'll take me with him. He's applied for permission to marry me. We're waiting for approval from his commanding officer. You'd leave Germany? Leave me? What's left for me here, Klaus? What future does this country offer me? She gestured at the ruins around them. James has a farm in Iowa. He talks about wide open spaces, about towns that weren't bombed, about a place where people don't look at me with hatred because I chose to live instead of die. Klaus felt something breaking inside him. I don't hate you. Don't you? Greta's voice was gentle now, sad. Not even a little? He couldn't answer. The next morning, Anna Schneider went into labor 2 weeks early. Klaus was at the clinic when it happened, and he found himself in the delivery room, translating between Anna and Dr. Morrison while a German midwife assisted. The labor was difficult. Anna was weak from months of poor nutrition, and the baby was small. Tell her to push, Dr. Morrison instructed. Tell her the baby's almost here. Klaus held Anna's hand, translating, encouraging, watching this woman bring new life into a world that seemed determined to destroy it. When the baby finally emerged, a tiny girl with a powerful cry, Anna collapsed back against the pillow, sobbing with relief and exhaustion. She's small but healthy, Dr. Morrison announced. Good lungs, strong heartbeat. She's a fighter. Klaus translated, and Anna reached for her daughter with trembling hands. Her name is Hope, she whispered in English, one of the words George had taught her. Hope Schneider. Later, after Anna and the baby were settled in the small ward, Klaus sat with her. Have you heard from George? He asked. Anna's face fell. No, nothing. I've written to the address he gave me, but She looked down at her sleeping daughter. I think he's not coming back. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry for me, Anna said, her voice stronger than Klaus expected. Be sorry for him. He's missing this. He's missing knowing his daughter, watching her grow. His loss, not mine. Klaus studied this young woman who'd been half dead from starvation a week ago, who'd been abandoned by her child's father, who faced a future of stigma and struggle as an unmarried mother in a society that would judge her harshly. And yet she spoke with dignity, with a fierce kind of pride. How do you do it? He asked. How do you stay strong? Anna looked at him with tired eyes. Because I have to. Because she needs me to. She touched her daughter's tiny hand. The war taught me that there's no point in worrying about what others think. Everyone has betrayed someone or been betrayed. Everyone has survived in ways they're not proud of. Anyone who judges me has done things just as bad, probably worse. Over the following weeks, Klaus found himself becoming more involved in the lives of the women who came to the clinic. He listened to their stories, translated their words, witnessed their struggles and their small victories. There was Margaret, whose American boyfriend sent money for her mother's medical care even after being transferred to Frankfurt. There was Sophie, who was learning English from her soldier companion and planning to attend university once things stabilized. There was Rosa, whose American husband, they'd married in a military ceremony, was trying to get approval to bring his German mother-in-law to America because she had no one else. Klaus also witnessed the darker side. He saw women who'd been used and discarded, women who'd been promised marriage only to be abandoned when transfer orders came through. He saw women dealing with unwanted pregnancies, women facing violence from both Germans who saw them as traitors and Americans who saw them as temporary entertainment. But gradually, Klaus began to understand something he'd resisted. These women weren't a monolithic group to be judged collectively. They were individuals making individual choices in impossible circumstances. Some choices worked out, some didn't. Some relationships were genuine, others were transactions. But each woman had her own story, her own reasons, her own dignity. One evening in November, Klaus returned to his apartment to find Greta waiting outside his door. She was alone this time and she looked nervous. Can we talk? She asked. Inside, Klaus made tea, real tea that Dr. Morrison had given him, and they sat at the small kitchen table where the photograph had arrived weeks ago. The photograph was still there, tucked into the frame of a small mirror. James's transfer came through, Greta said. He's being sent back to the States in 3 weeks. Klaus felt his stomach drop. And you? The marriage approval came through yesterday. I'm going with him. She pulled out a letter, official American military letterhead. We're getting married next week at the base chapel. Then I'll travel with him to Iowa, to his farm. Klaus stared at the letter, at the official stamps and signatures that would take his sister away. I don't want you to go, he said quietly. I know. Not because I'm angry anymore. Not because I think you're betraying anything. But because you're all I have left, Greta. You're my only family. Greta reached across the table and took his hand. You can come visit us. When things settle down, when it's possible to travel again. James has already said you'd be welcome. I can't leave Germany. This is my home, despite everything. Then I'll write. I'll send photographs. I'll tell you about Iowa and the farm and whatever life we build there. She squeezed his hand. But Klaus, I need you to understand. I'm not just running away. I'm running toward something. Toward a future. Toward a place where I can be more than a survivor, more than a victim. Klaus looked at his sister, really looked at her, and saw not betrayal but courage. She was choosing to leave behind everything familiar, everyone she knew, to build a new life in a foreign country with a man she'd known for only 6 months. It was terrifying and brave and possibly foolish, but it was her choice, made with open eyes. I understand, he said, and realized he meant it. I don't like it, but I understand. Will you come to the wedding? Klaus hesitated. Attending would mean entering the American base, watching his sister marry an occupation soldier, publicly accepting what he'd spent months resenting. It would mean acknowledging that the world had changed and he had to change with it. Yes, he said. I'll come. The wedding was small, held in a plain chapel on the American base. Klaus needed special permission to enter, and the guards searched him thoroughly before allowing him through. Inside the chapel, there were perhaps 20 people. A few of James's fellow soldiers, 3 German women who were friends of Greta's, and Klaus. James Patterson turned out to be younger than Klaus expected, maybe 25, with an open, honest face and a nervous energy as he waited at the altar. When Greta entered wearing a simple white dress, borrowed from another German war bride, James's face transformed with such obvious love that Klaus felt his remaining resistance crumble. The ceremony was in English, which Klaus understood but which must have been largely incomprehensible to Greta. But she'd memorized her vows phonetically, and she spoke them clearly. I, Greta, take you, James, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward. Afterward, there was a small reception with cake, real cake, made with real sugar and eggs and coffee and music. Klaus stood awkwardly to one side until James approached him. Klaus, right? Greta's brother. James extended his hand. His German was heavily accented but understandable. I'm glad you came. It means a lot to Greta. Means a lot to me too. Klaus shook his hand. Take care of her. I will. I promise. James looked over at Greta, who was laughing with one of the other women. I know this isn't easy for you. If I were in your position, if my sister was marrying someone from a country that had just defeated us, I don't know if I could be as accepting as you're being. I'm not sure I am being accepting, Klaus admitted. But I'm trying. James nodded. That's all anyone can ask. He paused, then said, You know, before I came to Germany, I thought all Germans were monsters. That's what we were told, what we believed. And some of what we saw when we arrived, the camps, the destruction, it seemed to confirm that. He looked directly at Klaus. But then I met people like Greta, like you, like the patients at your clinic. And I realized that people are just people everywhere. Good and bad, brave and cowardly, kind and cruel. The war made us see each other as enemies. But maybe now we can see each other as just human. Klaus felt something loosen in his chest. I hope so. Over the next 2 weeks, Klaus spent as much time with Greta as he could. They walked through the city together, visiting the places they'd known as children, saying goodbye to a shared past. They went to what remained of their old school, their old apartment building, the park where they'd played as children. Everything was damaged or destroyed, but the memories remained. Do you think you'll ever come back? Klaus asked as they stood on the Oberbaumbrücke, the bridge crossing the Spree River that divided the American and Soviet sectors. I don't know, Greta said honestly. Maybe someday when Germany is rebuilt, when it's a different place. She looked at the ruined cityscape. I love this city, Klaus. I love our language, our culture, the good parts of who we are. But I can't love what we became, what was done in our name. I need distance from that. Klaus understood. He felt it too, the weight of collective guilt, the shame of having been part, however reluctant, of something monstrous. Write to me, he said. Tell me about Iowa. Tell me about America. Tell me if it's as wonderful as James says it is. And you write back. Tell me about Germany. Tell me when the rebuilding starts, when things get better. Tell me if you find someone, Klaus. You deserve happiness too. On the day of departure, Klaus accompanied them to the train station where military transports took departing soldiers and their dependents to Bremerhaven for the ship to America. The platform was crowded with soldiers and German women. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all heading to new lives in America. Klaus watched these women, these war brides, and saw their faces. Some excited, some terrified, some determinately hopeful. They carried small suitcases containing everything they could take from their old lives. They held hands with American soldiers who'd been enemies a year ago and were now husbands. They were leaving behind rubble and shame and hunger for a future that was uncertain but couldn't be worse than what they were leaving. I'm scared, Greta admitted as the train whistle blew. I know, but you're also brave. Braver than I am. She hugged him tightly. Take care of yourself, big brother. Find a way to be happy. Klaus watched the train pull away, watched Greta's face in the window until the train disappeared around a curve. He stood on the empty platform for a long time afterward, feeling the November cold seep into his bones. 3 months later, Klaus received the first letter from Iowa. Greta wrote about the farm, about the wide open spaces that went on forever, about learning to cook American food and to understand American customs. She wrote about James's family, his parents who'd been nervous about meeting a German woman but had welcomed her warmly, his younger sister who was teaching her better English, his community that had accepted her despite everything. "I'm pregnant," she wrote. "Due in July. We're hoping for a boy. James wants to name him Martin, after our brother." I said yes. "I hope that's okay with you." Klaus held the letter and cried. For Martin. For the past. For Greta's new life and his solitary one. For everything lost and everything gained. He returned to work at the clinic with renewed purpose. Anna Schneider and baby Hope were doing well. Anna had found work at a bakery, and a German widower named Otto had started courting her, knowing about Hope's parentage and accepting it. Werner at the black market had reconnected with a woman from his neighborhood, and they were planning to marry. Even Friedrich Kohler had stopped drinking so much and started working construction, helping to rebuild the city. Berlin was slowly coming back to life. The rubble was being cleared, buildings were being repaired, people were remembering how to hope. The occupation continued, the tensions remained. But there was also progress, reconciliation, the slow and painful work of building something new from the ruins. One spring day, Klaus was walking home from the clinic when he encountered a young German woman arguing with an American soldier in the street. The soldier was trying to explain something, his German inadequate to the task, and the woman was getting increasingly frustrated. "Can I help?" Klaus asked in English. The soldier looked relieved. "Thank God. Can you translate? I'm trying to explain." One spring day, Klaus was walking home from the clinic when he encountered a young German woman arguing with an American soldier in the street. The soldier was trying to explain something, his German inadequate to the task, and the woman was getting increasingly frustrated. "Can I help?" Klaus asked in English. The soldier looked relieved. "Thank God. Can you translate? I'm trying to explain to this lady that I want to help her find her brother. He was a POW in our camp, and I have information about where he was released." Klaus translated, and watched the woman's face transform from anger to hope to tears. He spent the next hour helping them communicate, helping this woman find a connection to her lost brother, helping build a small bridge between former enemies. As he walked away, he thought about Greta in Iowa, about Anna and baby Hope, about all the German women who'd found ways to survive and even to thrive in the aftermath of catastrophe. He thought about James Patterson's words, "People are just people everywhere." That evening, Klaus sat down and wrote a letter to Greta. He told her about Anna, about the young woman finding her brother, about the slow rebuilding of the city and his life. He told her he was proud of her courage. He told her he was learning to live with complexity, with contradictions, with a world that didn't offer simple answers or clear moral lines. "I understand now," he wrote. "You weren't betraying our past. You were claiming your future. And maybe that's what all of us need to do. Acknowledge what happened, carry the weight of it, but not let it destroy what's left of our lives." Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. He sealed the letter and addressed it to Greta Patterson, Iowa, USA. The name looked strange, foreign, but also hopeful. 2 years later, Klaus received a photograph in the mail. It showed Greta holding a baby boy with dark hair and bright eyes. James stood beside them, his arm around his wife, all three of them smiling in front of a white farmhouse under an enormous sky. On the back, Greta had written, "Martin James Patterson, born July 12, 1948. Healthy and happy. Come visit us, Klaus. Come see that hope is possible." Klaus placed the photograph on his kitchen table, next to the original one that had arrived that Tuesday morning in October 1946. 2 photographs, 2 different worlds, 2 different versions of his sister. But the same smile, the same courage, the same determination to live. In Berlin, spring was turning to summer. The city was rebuilding. The scars remained, but new life was emerging from the ruins. Klaus had met someone. A teacher named Elizabeth who'd lost her husband in the war and understood complicated grief. They took walks together, shared meals, built something tentative and careful that might become love. The world was still broken, still unjust, still carrying the weight of millions of dead and the shame of unspeakable crimes. But people were surviving, connecting, finding ways forward. German women and Allied soldiers had created families, built bridges, produced the next generation that would inherit both the trauma and the hope. Klaus never did visit Iowa. The distance was too great, the cost too high, the political situation too complicated. But he and Greta wrote letters for the rest of their lives, sharing their stories, their children's stories, keeping their connection alive across an ocean and a cultural divide. Years later, when people asked Klaus about the occupation years, about the war brides, about those complicated times when enemies became lovers and old loyalties were tested, he would think carefully before answering. It was messy, he would say. It was painful. It was full of contradictions. Some women were used and abandoned. Some found genuine love. Some made pragmatic choices that saved their lives. Some betrayed their principles, and some discovered principles they didn't know they had. But mostly they survived. In a world that wanted them dead or broken, they found ways to survive. And there's courage in that, even when it doesn't look heroic. And he would think about Greta's smile in that first photograph, the smile that had seemed like betrayal but was actually hope. The smile that had helped him understand that survival takes many forms, and judgment is easy for those who've never faced impossible choices. In the end, the 90,000 German women who had babies with Allied soldiers after World War II were not a statistic or a moral lesson. They were individuals, sisters, daughters, mothers, who navigated the wreckage of history as best they could, who chose life over death, future over past, hope over despair. Klaus kept both photographs on his table for the rest of his life, testaments to the complicated truth that in the aftermath of catastrophe, people find ways to connect, to love, to continue. The world judges, history records, but life, stubborn, resilient, infinitely complex life, simply continues. And perhaps that, in the end, is its own form of victory.